I believe that the most dangerous religion in the world today, the most dangerous orienting worldview that has fundamental explanations for almost everything and ways of addressing what is pathos, what is logos, what is the way humans should move forward, that has articles of faith. So I'll call it a religion in those types of sense, but I'll call it a worldview formally. The most dangerous worldview by far, way more than the evangelical Christianity that would blow up abortion clinics, and way more than the Caliphate Islam that would behead people who disagree, is the naive progress narrative
Mm.
that expresses as techno optimism and capitalist optimism and modernity optimism and things like that. It is by far a more dangerous worldview. Consilience Project, we wrote an article people might enjoy called How to Mislead with Facts. And it basically says I can take facts that are true by the deepest definition of any fact checker, but I cherry pick the facts. So I can have a Gaussian distribution of things and cherry pick all the ones on this side, not this side. They're true facts, but they're not representative of all the things, right? And even which Gaussian distribution am I looking at? So I can cherry pick the facts. I can decontextualize them. I can take them out of a context, apply them in another context in which the context change actually changes the meaning of it. And I can Lakoff frame them, right? I can put a framing on them. So do I call them terrorists or freedom fighters? Depends upon which side I'm on. The American revolutionaries were terrorists, the British, right? They were freedom fighters. And now for America, they were the founding fathers. And so, and yet anyone else who's trying to become free and secede and whatever is a terrorist. So do I call them illegal aliens, or do I call them undocumented migrants seeking asylum? And so, of course, I'm talking about the exact same fucking thing, but I put a moral or emotional valence on it. And we actually can't not do this. That's happening all the time. So between cherry picking, decontextualizing, recontextualizing, putting moral valence on, I can take 100% true stats and draw a conclusion that is 100% specious. And that it's not that's a thing that is done sometimes. It's that in journalism, that's almost never not the thing being done.
Yeah.
Because the earnest desire to know what is true is who wants to pay for that?
Mm.
The desire to say the thing that is aligned with our political party or that appeals to our readership that already has a bunch of biases, that wants certainty, even if artificial, and wants to know who the bad guy is that they can blame for the problems and orient to the in group. And there's just so many vested interests that have one do that thing. So if I look at the progress narrative and I talk about all the things that democracy and capitalism and technology and modernity and whatever have done, and I say, well, let's ask all the native people how well modernity went for them, how well the progress narrative went for them. Oh, I can't. We extincted most of them through genocide. Like almost all the Native Americans were genocide. How many? Like 100 million, right? Like 4 times more people than were killed in all of World War II. And the progress narrative has to fucking deal with that. And not only did we take this just undeveloped land because it was open, it wasn't. It was many, many advanced ancient civilizations, some of which had amazing wisdom and beauty. They were savages, and we had to civilize them. And, and we had to build our infrastructure with slavery. So often what we're doing is saying the progress narrative is saying for this in-group, things got better. This in-group is some people, not all people within a group. Even within the group, it's some classes, not all classes in the same way. And it's some metrics, quality of life in these metrics. So you'll hear dumb shit like, well, the average human used to live on $1.50 a day in 1850 in the United States, and now they live on $50 a day. And even adjusting for purchasing power parity or inflation, look at what that is, or $100, whatever it is. Yeah, but they grew most of their fucking food.
Mm.
They hunted. They cut down the trees themselves for their home. Their house was not mediated by dollars. Like a little bit of their life was mediated by dollar, but a huge amount of their life was mediated by a direct relationship with other people in the ecosystem and barter and self-sustainability. So the decontextualization of dollar did not mediate quality of life, that is ridiculous, right? So you have to come back to that. Then, of course, quantified things that get measured, and specifically the subset of those that we really pay attention to, like GDP go up is good. Well, GDP goes up in war. GDP goes up with addiction. More addiction, more money is spent, right? GDP goes up with the body dysmorphia that drives the addictions to address a thing. GDP, good measure of total health. GDP goes up with environmental destruction, right? Increase the rate of mining and pollution, GDP goes up. So then you add another metric. The qualified things, when everybody is on their deathbed reflecting on what was meaningful, it's not quantified shit. It was not how much they added to GDP. It was not their productivity list. It was like the most meaningful things are also the most intangible. They were feelings of love between them and people. They were feelings of the numinous that they had. They were places where they were transcended their own little selfishness and really showed up for other people in meaningful ways that don't get measured and optimized in that narrative. In fact, they're the things that most get fucked in the pursuit of the quantified things, right? And even the quantified things, we are not measuring how well the Native American societies are doing in that, like even where we could measure stuff. So we're picking very partial measures. So do I like Novocaine? Of course. And let's even just look at this one. And now I'm going to make an example that sounds kind of extreme, but it's so important to like kind of get the frame. You look at Weston Price's work that ended up being significant in forming what became the American Dental Association. And in the 30s, he was looking at some of the native tribes around the world that had not yet had conventional agriculture, what we call conventional, that it was obviously not at all the historical, hunter-gatherer life. Specifically, didn't have primary amount of their diet come from grains and refined sugars and things like that, and found that they didn't have dental issues. They didn't have cavities, and they didn't have the overcrowding where they needed orthodonture or their wisdom teeth removed. And the hypothesis was they were the mineralization of their diet and the nature of the fatty acids in their diet and whatever led to a bone density where their mandible and maxilla didn't grow super crooked teeth and had room for the wisdom teeth. And now, of course, people have this research is not perfect, but there is much true to it. Now, the Hobbesian narrative, brutish, short, nasty, and mean, of course, their longevity is shorter if you factor infant mortality. But that doesn't mean people only live to be 30 years old. This is just a gibberish interpretation. Old people were old people for all of human history. And infant mortality, we have grown our population from 500 billion people just a couple hundred years ago, right? The whole of 200,000 years of sapient history, 2 million years of hominids, never got above 500 million people. We went from 500 million people at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to 8 billion, which means 16 times the extraction of Earth's resources. But we didn't, and 16 times the pollution, but we also increased the per capita resource use by over 100x in the developed world. Obviously, people who are in the upper economic bracket, it can be thousands of x. And so you're talking about, something like 1600x overnight increase, and which is why now the geological age of the Anthropocene, the surface of the entire planet, is mostly defined by human activity. Now, coming back to the will we adapt, there was an article published a few months ago by the American Chemical Society, Journal of American Chemical Society, on forever chemicals in the environment and rainwater, the fluorinated surfactants, PFAS, those ones. They're called forever chemicals because there are no biological processes that break them down, kind of like styrofoam, but these ones are like little bitty invisible styrofoams. They're the Rain-X and all the things that are used in packaging and to make water retardants and certain industrial surfactants and stuff. Because they're designed to be water repellent, they float to the surface of water. They're so small they actually evaporate, which means they get into the rainwater, rain everywhere. This study showed that rainwater samples all around the world in very, very remote places had higher than EPA levels of these chemicals, including in snowfall in the middle of Antarctica. This means that they're here, right? And no matter where, there are chemicals that are carcinogens and neurotoxins and endocrine disruptors that there are no biological processes because they were not part of the billions of years of biosphere evolution. They were things that we figured out how to make in super advanced chemistry labs that biology cannot process. Will we adapt in time to deal with that? Totally not. Totally not. And so in the same way, if we make something, right, the biosphere, if you really want to understand, like the biosphere is a few atoms, like mostly 6 atoms and some trace minerals in certain types of molecular arrangements. And that is a very old thing, right? That's like a multi-billions of year old thing where every animal, fungus, plant, everything can break down and get turned into everything else through the same processes. And we start mining the shit that the first billion years of geology and hydrology took the mercury and the cadmium and the arsenic and the stuff that would be super toxic to biology, locked it in rocks and put it way deep under the biosphere. We mine it up, separate it out, stick the fucking lead in the gasoline and internal combustion for silly reasons and blow it into the atmosphere or the PFAS or the whatever, and are actually changing the chemical constituents of the biosphere in the most fundamental way that biology cannot process. It can't even deal with those atoms, let alone those advanced molecular forms that we make. Would it adapt eventually? Like maybe in some Chernobyl type style, after killing almost everything, some new mutant type of stuff comes about. Can we adapt to organophosphates and phthalates and whatever? No. Psychologically, same. We are creating things that are foreign enough that they are outside of the functional adaptivity range. That's an important thing to get, that all animals are shaped by their environment. We're the only animal that changes our environment so radically because of our extension through the types of technology that we can make environments that we are not actually well fit to. But we will make the fitness selection will be a narrow one. Does this society win in war? It makes it through, the other ones are killed. Might the Native Americans have caused no fucking environmental issues and still been fine and been fine with a steady state population for a long time? Sure. But were they going to be able to compete with guns? No. And so the thing that makes it through is not necessarily more sustainable or more true, good, and beautiful. It's more effectively dominant at extraction and war. Was the Maoist China invasion of Tibet, did China win because it was good, more good than Tibet, or because it was better at dominance, even if that same dominance pattern is on the path to self-termination? Now, history gets written by the winners, which means I can't say, you know what, the civilizations we destroyed were lovely people. They were more wise, kind, enlightened, and better relationship with the environment, and we're just super effective, violent fucks. We can't say that. So we have to say we would civilize the savages. We brought Christendom to them. We brought Western civilization. We brought whatever the fuck the thing is that we're saying we brought. We brought science and technology. We brought capitalism or we brought Christendom are the same thing, right? Which is, and so history written by the winners turns into a naive progress narrative where the things that won get measured and all the things that got destroyed don't. Now, if you want to have a progress narrative that isn't naive, you have to say, this measure that was advanced, what was the cost? Where was the cost externalized? Not the internal cost that we paid for, but all the costs we didn't pay for in terms of the effects on the environment, whatever. And in the same ways we can see that our industrial supply chains don't pay for the cost of what it would cost nature to remake that thing or to deal with all the waste. It's just the cost of us extracting it. How much does it cost us to extract it? And then a tiny margin, and that's it, right? And so we actually don't pay for 99.9 something percent of the real costs of a thing. We just fucking steal it from nature. So then nature's getting depleted on one side and polluted on the other.